Howdy doody. If you're a frequent watcher of my videos, you're probably wondering why we're in the boiler room of my house. And I promise this video will be relevant to audio electronics, specifically vintage audio electronics. But really the main topic of today's video is why you can't trust the experts or the professionals. And it all starts with a short anecdote about the furnace that heats my home. Now, I moved into this house with my mom when I was a wee lad right before September 11th. So let's say starting in 2001. And for the whole time of me living here, there was a huge problem with this furnace. And it was immediately noticeable to anyone who walked in the house during the winter months. My walls would literally gurgle loudly. Now it's because there was air in the system. And this was bad for a lot of reasons. One, it was annoying. Two, it was embarrassing when my friends would come over and wonder why the hell my walls were gurgling. Three, air doesn't nearly conduct or transfer heat as well as water, so this would be on all the time, using more gas, costing more money. And because it would be on all the time, it would cause the thermocouple to burn out in the system. That would have to be replaced. A maintenance man would have to come. It was a big deal. And it was so bad that every single year, at least once, sometimes twice, we would have to call a professional in here to come look at this system. And each time, we would say to said professional, we have a huge problem with air in the system, which they could definitely tell because you could hear it. Can you please help us get the air out of the system? And for, let's just say 15 years, this went on. And no one in the professional field of heating and houses could figure this out. Why there was air in the system. They would tell us to manually purge the system, and that was really labor intensive, and it would make a mess, and it would only fix the issue for about an hour, right? So fast forward to me graduating from college. I went to school for mechanical engineering. It's slightly relevant here. My first job out of college, I get hired by this company called and they specialize in making industrial induction furnaces, huge furnaces to melt metal in forgeries. And my job specifically was to design closed-loop water cooling systems. Now, that's exactly what this is, how this furnace operates. It is a closed-loop system. Instead of cooling, it is actually heating, but it's actually the same exact setup, just instead of the furnace heating up the water and then going in my radiators and radiating heat, I was designing systems that would cool down a furnace and would radiate heat through a heat exchanger or water cooling tower, whatever. The specifics aren't important here. The point is, I was hired to design closed-loop water systems. And my first week of training, the guy I worked with was explaining to me the basic components of a closed-loop system. You have your pump to move the water, you have your pressure-reducing valve to let the water in, you have a high vent that removes air from the water. And I said, wait a minute, Dale, say that again? He said, yeah, we use a high vent to remove the air in the system. I said, Dale, what did you just say? We use a high vent to remove air from the system. And I said, that is interesting, a high vent. It automatically purges the air. And he goes, yeah, that's the basic component of any closed-loop water system. So the first thing I did after he told me that, my first week of working there, I ran home, I look into my furnace, and what do you have it? Hopefully you can see it on the camera here. I'll get a better shot if you can't see it. There's a high vent right here. And I immediately go to Home Depot, get a $20 replacement high vent. These are all standard. This taco high vent is seen in industrial and home uses. I put it on, and voila, within 10 minutes, no more air in the system. It has been probably about 7 years since that point, and I have never heard gurgling. I have never had a thermocouple go bad. I've never had to call a maintenance man. I've never had to do anything. This system has been operating flawlessly. Now, does that make sense to you? Does that make sense that I probably had about 20 different repairmans over the years specializing in HVAC coming in here to fix the system, and they didn't figure out that they should replace the component on the system that is meant to purge air from the system? To me, that sounds ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous and really just shows the incompetency of people in their professional fields. And this is not a complicated part. This is like you going to a mechanic and then not checking to see if your battery is charged. This is a basic component. These go bad because of the minerals in your water. The water in my area is very hard, meaning it has a lot of minerals. So these things, go bad after 10, 20 years, 30 years, whatever. This should have been a basic thing that one of these people should have checked, yet no one did. So what does this have to do with audio electronics? The same principle can be applied to all aspects of life. People who are experts, professionals, you can't trust their word for it. And I found this out really early on when I started getting into recording equipment and I first got my tape machine, my TAC 80-8. And I really don't want to go into specifics because I don't like calling people out, especially when they don't have a chance to defend themselves. So I'm keeping it really broad, but the first person I ever brought that machine, I was having a problem with, the first person I ever brought it to is considered the professional in the world for these types of machines. And out of chance, he wound up also living in the same state as me, very convenient. I wound up getting the machine back in worse condition than I sent him. And he's supposed to be an expert. He's internationally known. Now, I could tell you at least probably 5 stories of the same caliber, of the same situation, me bringing some vintage electronics to someone and getting it back in condition that was the same as I gave it to them, or sometimes even worse. And part of it is due to incompetence, but really the bigger part of it is these people do not have the time to sit down and do the proper checks, alignments, calibrations that is warranted for these vintage pieces of equipment, right? The number of people that even work on vintage audio equipment is so dwindling, you have no idea. And within 5 to 10 years, there's not even going to be professional people you could really reach out to. So I learned very early on that I need to learn to start fixing this stuff for myself. And it was very daunting at first. I had no idea what I was looking at, and it really just takes time. I didn't go to school for electronical engineering, so it's not like I knew what I was looking at when I first started. It just took a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of, using Google to learn how electronics work, really. And you start at the basics, what does a resistor look like? What does a transistor look like? Where's the power supply? You start small, and over the course of years, you will learn to fix stuff. And really, 99% of the issues that I've ever encountered with electronic equipment is super simple stuff that is usually more mechanical means than electrical means, and you just need to use some basic logic to figure out how to fix it. And I probably should do a whole video in itself talking about, the really, really basic stuff you should be looking at as someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. And, I'll save that for a later video. I won't go into detail, but really the point I'm trying to get here is the experts have no idea what they're doing. They don't have the time it properly takes to take care of your equipment. This is going to be true for all aspects of life. Taking care of your car. You bring your car to a mechanic, they're not going to do as good a job as you're going to do if you were able to work on your car, right? You're going to take the time and do the job right, hopefully. And, unfortunately, they just don't have the time to do that, and sometimes they don't have the actual expertise, and they're kind of just faking it till they make it. I guess I should end this video with some audio electronics talk. So, right here we're looking at my stereo receiver. This was the very first piece of vintage audio equipment I had ever bought. I bought this back in high school when I was about 14 or 15 with this record player. And I love this thing. I've had it so long, but when I first got it, I was having issues with it. And specifically, the right channel was intermittent. It would go on, it would go off, it would go on and go off. And at first, it only happened a little bit, and it wasn't that big of an issue, and then it started to become an issue. So I had no idea about repairing audio equipment back then. I had no idea what to do, so I went to a audio equipment service to repair this unit. To make a long story short, I paid $100, and the guy told me, oh, the safety relay in this unit went bad. I replaced it. You're going to be all good now. Came back home. What do you know? 30 minutes into listening to my next record, it was probably Led Zeppelin 3, honestly. I was listening to Led Zeppelin a lot back then. Same issue, right channel, on and off, on and off, on and off. I was heartbroken. I was upset. I spent a lot of money to get it fixed, and that sucked, right? $100 for me at that time was a lot of money. So what do I do then, right? I'm like, okay, let me bring it to a second guy. Now, this was someone, I found out about this person through the music school I was going to at the time. They recommended this place. I go to that place. That time, it only cost me $75, and I don't remember specifically what they had told me they had fixed, but they told me something was wrong and they fixed it. I hope you see where this story is going. I brought it home into my first record, right channel, on and off, on and off, on, off, issues. At this point, I'm ready to tear my hair out. I'm thinking I'm never buying a piece of vintage audio equipment again. But I didn't give up, and I said, let me see if I can figure out what's wrong with it. I did some very basic research, and the first thing anyone ever is going to tell you when you work on a piece of audio equipment is you need to use contact cleaner in the switches and potentiometers. That's what I did. I went to Home Depot and bought a contact cleaner. I still have the same can, actually, of contact cleaner. I sprayed the potentiometers. Voila! Problem done. It was a dirty volume pot. Now, listen to me. Are you listening? If you know anything about audio equipment, you know that the issue being a scratchy pot, or an intermittent pot rather, and I brought this to 2 professionals and they didn't even use contact cleaner in the potentiometer. I mean, come on, people. That's insane. Excuse my language, that's ridiculous, dude. I mean, that's the most basic thing you do when you repair audio equipment is you spray contact cleaner and clean out the switches and potentiometers. That was the issue this whole time. It's now, more than a decade later. This thing is still chugging along fine. Occasionally, I do have to go in and spray some contact cleaner, but it'll work good for a long time after that. Is my lesson here clear enough that the professionals have no idea what the they're doing? I'm sorry. It's just it's very frustrating. It is very frustrating, and I'm sure it's been frustrating for, people watching this who've been in similar situations where you go someplace that you trust and you just get boned. All right? Well, let's all think about getting boned together and dwell on that. All right. End in the video. Good night.